All right. So we are going back in time about 18 months back when the Hands On IT podcast came out in October of 2024, hosted by Landon Miles and Forrest Brazil, who were talking about the state of IT careers, the macroeconomic climate, the return to office pressure, and the rise of AI. And 18 months later, I thought it would be worth revisiting because some of what Forrest said has aged incredibly well. Some of it, of course, hits differently now, and a few things, well, the field in general has moved even faster than anyone ever predicted. So, my name is Chelsea. I am the SVP of Human Resources here at Automox, and let's get right into it.
Your perspective of when everyone is senior, no one is really resonated with me. Can you give a little bit more context there?
As a senior engineer, you have to be able to accomplish things without someone sort of standing over your shoulder and making sure you're doing the right thing, except for potentially an AI assistant, because we're seeing more and more that these AI assistants help seniors a lot more than they do juniors, right? Because you need that human expertise to kind of come alongside. But a junior employee, someone who's starting out their career, is going to need human assistance alongside them.
What are some of the key skills IT professionals should focus on to stand out in today's job market?
What I've seen over the past 4 years and change as folks who are upskilling, changing careers have dug into that project is that they'll come back to me and they'll say, hey, the skills that I got the most benefit out of from this project were not that, hey, I can write some Python now, or, I've learned some JavaScript now, but that I'm not afraid to learn new things anymore, right? That's really the biggest thing that I would focus on.
What would you say to the IT professional who's been through the ringer in terms of applications and interviews and still hasn't landed a job?
The most important thing I would say is do not give up. I promise you there are roles out there that you would be perfect for. But I would also encourage you to stop trying to find those by going through the ringer, if you will, and sort of cold applying to a bunch of places where you don't have an in. I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've gotten a job in probably close to 10 years that wasn't through someone in my personal network. I would look for ways to get baked into a community, whether that's through an online, Discord or Slack channel or something with like-minded professionals, whether it's by attending some conferences, whether it is by continuing to put yourself out there with some content creation and other things that just sort of shines a bat signal that, hey, here's what I care about, here's what I'm working on. That does work. It does take time, but it takes less time.
So, one of the things that stood out to me listening back to this conversation is just how much Forrest got right. The technologies have really evolved. AI has accelerated faster than many of us could ever have expected. And the hiring market has continued to shift. But I think his central message around the importance of learning agility still holds true today. So, if I were summarizing the state of IT careers in one sentence, I'd say the people who are thriving aren't necessarily the people with the deepest expertise in a single tool. They're the people who can continuously learn, adapt, and apply new technologies effectively. As far as like what's stayed the same, the first thing that has stayed remarkably consistent is the importance of that learning agility. So Forrest talked about not being afraid to learn new things. And I think that becomes even more important over the last year. As someone operating through an HR lens, when I look at high performing employees, it's rarely because they know one specific technology better than anyone else. It's really because they can navigate change, they can learn quickly, they can adapt as the environment changes around them. And the second thing that has absolutely remained true is the criticality of networking in a really tough labor market. In some ways, networking is even more important today than it was when this podcast was last recorded. AI has simply made it easier than ever to apply for jobs. We see candidates that generate resumes and they can customize cover letters and they can submit multiple applications at scale. And one important thing to note is that recruiters and hiring managers are also having to review more applications than ever before. And so I think having that deep personal relationship with someone that's already established in the company can really kind of help cut through some of that noise and some of the steps in the process so that your resume doesn't get kind of buried down below multiple candidates. And so Networking isn't really about bypassing the hiring process per se, but it is about entering the process with credibility and trust already established. So, as far as what's different today, the biggest difference that I see from a year ago is that AI is no longer something organizations are preparing for. It's here. And employees are using it every day. Teams are using it every day. Leaders are trying to understand how it fits into workflows every day. And so the conversation has really shifted away from will AI change work to how do we work effectively alongside AI? And I think that's where some really interesting new challenges are emerging. So, one of the biggest shifts that I've seen is that what we look for in certain roles is changing. Long gone are the days when we were hiring a software engineer whose primary job was to manually write code for 8 hours a day. Increasingly, we're now looking for engineers who can direct the work of multiple AI agents and evaluate outputs and make decisions, apply that judgment, and orchestrate those complex systems. So the value isn't simply in generating output. The value is really in knowing what should be built, evaluating the quality, understanding the trade-offs, and then ensuring the outcome solves for the right problem. So that's fundamentally a different skill set that we're now looking for. And I think we're going to see that same shift happen across many roles, not just engineering, which was the example that I gave. So I also think that a huge shift that we've seen in the last 18 months is how AI is changing how we think about productivity. Historically, organizations measured productivity through output, and they were focused on how many tickets were closed and how many projects were completed and how much code was written, how much documentation was produced. And AI is really challenging all of those measures. So an employee can now generate significantly more output with the help of AI tools. And so the question really becomes, are they more productive or are they simply using better tools? And to me, the answer is usually both. And I think as leaders, we're increasingly shifting our focus away from measuring activity and towards measuring outcomes. And output is becoming easier to generate, judgment is becoming more valuable, problem solving is becoming more valuable, and therefore the business impact is becoming more valuable. But one of the biggest shifts that I think that we're really missing is most of the conversation around AI focuses on how it changes individual jobs. And what I think we're only beginning to understand is how AI is changing organizations. Historically, organizations were constrained by two things, which was capacity and specialization. Capacity was very simple. We only had so many people that were available to do the work. And specialization meant that only a handful of people knew how to do certain things. And as a result, organizations built systems to manage those constraints. They built reporting structures, they built RACIs, they had daily stand-ups, they had, very stringent and rigorous approval processes. They have governance in place. And much of the organizational design was really about making sure that the right expertise was applied to the right problem at the right time. And as far as how AI is changing both of those constraints, I think that the constraints haven't disappeared, but they've changed dramatically. Teams that can't hire additional people can suddenly move 2, 3, or even 5 times faster with the support of AI. People who previously lacked specialized knowledge can now access expertise and recommendations and designs and documentations and code on demand. What once required finding that one expert in the company can increasingly become accomplished through self-service. And that's incredibly powerful, but it creates new challenge. The challenge isn't really access anymore, but the challenge is more around coordination. And so I think that leads us into a new organizational problem. So what I'm really seeing across organizations is that AI adoption is uneven. Some teams are moving incredibly fast and others are still figuring out, how do we use these tools? Some managers are embracing AI and others are still learning how to manage in an AI managed environment. And the result is that organizational velocity has really become uneven. And you can have one team operating at 5 times the speed of another, and you could have many of the old checks and balances that start breaking down, not because anyone is doing anything wrong, but because those systems were designed for different operating models. Another thing that I think that we have to be mindful of as an organization is the rise of self-service expertise. So historically, if I wanted something done, I'd often have to go through a subject matter expert. That created visibility, it created alignment, it created that coordination. And Today, I can generate that solution myself. I can draft a plan. I can build a prototype. I can write the documentation. I can create the first version of an implementation. And that's all amazing, but it does introduce risk. And so just because I can do it myself doesn't mean everyone who needs to know about it knows it's happening. And just because I can generate something doesn't mean it's as good as what an experienced subject matter expert would have created. And so I think one of the challenges that organizations are wrestling with is a new question around how do we really preserve visibility and alignment and quality and governance in a world where expertise is becoming self-service. So with all that said, not all friction should be removed, and this is where leadership becomes incredibly important. So for years as leaders, we focused on removing friction, and there is absolutely friction that should be removed. And that's where AI does assist us, right? It helps us in that manual reporting. It helps us in that administrative work. It helps us in those routine tasks. And AI is fantastic in helping us to manage our capacity and our time wisely. But some friction was actually creating value. And the conversation with the senior engineer that Forrest alluded to, that created that mentoring moment, that architecture review, the opportunity to really understand not just what to do, but why are we doing it? And historically, people came to experts because they had no other choice. And so today, they may not need the expert to complete the work, but they may still need expert involved for alignment, governance, risk management, architecture decision, and organizational awareness. And so in other words, you may not need me because you can't do the work. You may need me because I need to know that the work is happening. And so I think organizations will spend the next several years redesigning the collaboration around that reality. Another concern that I have in general, just from an HR lens, is the thing I think about most isn't whether AI makes experienced employees more productive. It clearly does, and we see that every day. But it's really around whether we are unintentionally removing the interactions that helped create those experienced employees in the first place. So those mentoring moments, the coaching moments, the opportunities to learn from the experts, and the transfer of institutional knowledge, and AI is helping us remove some of that friction. The challenge for leaders now is determining which friction was actually helping people grow because of those learning organic moments. And because the future of work isn't just about making today's experts more productive, but it is about ensuring we can still create tomorrow's experts. And so to kind of wrap up, when I think about what all that means for IT careers and organizations, I actually come away like pretty optimistic. I think every major technology shift has changed the way we work, and AI is no different. The challenge isn't whether AI will change jobs. We know it already has, but I think the challenge is really how we intentionally adapt our organizations, our leadership practices, and our talent strategies alongside it. I think organizations can get ahead of many of these challenges by being more explicit about where expertise and accountability still matter. We'll likely see AI governance beyond acceptable use policies and moving more into kind of clear decision rights around AI generated work. We also know that AI may be perfectly appropriate for generating a first draft of something or building that prototype or conducting research. But when we're talking about security controls or HR matters or customer commitments or other high impact decisions, we have to ensure that we have clear expectations around that subject matter expert review and approval. And so I think by focusing on some of this parameter and governance around kind of the new future of working, I think it's important to also be mindful that the goal is not to slow people down. The goal is really to preserve speed while maintaining quality and accountability and organizational alignment. And I think this is where managers have an incredibly important role to play in the future. So employees know that work is changing, and pretending otherwise doesn't help us. I think the best managers won't tell their employees that AI isn't changing their work, but they'll help their employees to understand how work is changing and how they can continue to grow and succeed in that environment. I also think that they can help build confidence using AI through the development of new skills and recognizing that the uniquely human aspects of work, the judgment, the creativity, the collaboration, the decision making, those are becoming more valuable, not any less valuable. And so looking ahead, I think we're going to see an entirely new constraints emerge. Historically, workforce planning asks questions like, do we have enough people and do we have enough expertise? And In the future, organizations may be asking now, do we have enough AI capacity? Are we managing model utilization effectively? Are we architecting our workflows efficiently? And are we making smart decisions about how humans and AI work together? And so, if there's one thing that I took away from listening to Forrest and Landon's conversation, it's that learning agility remains the single most important predictor of success. But I think that the challenge has evolved. It's no longer just about whether an individual can learn and adapt, it's about whether organizations can learn and adapt as quickly as the people inside them. The companies that will be the most successful won't necessarily be the ones that adopt AI the fastest, but they for sure will be the ones that figure out how to preserve that expertise, develop future talent, maintain that accountability, and create environments where both humans and AI can do their best work together.